Success, Part 4.
Black Company.
Hey everybody, welcome to the fourth and final in our Success series of episodes. I'm going to be up. I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. With me is
Keith Vincent, one of your other hosts.
And your other host, Julian Cage. And with us, special guest, Jocko Farino. Hi, everyone.
Right.
Hey, Jocko.
Hello.
It's always great having you on and always sad when we're on our last
I know.
episode.
It's been a great 4 weeks.
We've
had a lot of laughs.
I feel like we've been holding hands for 4 weeks. It's going to be sad to, not feel your grasp.
To finally just like release one from the centipede.
Mm-hmm. And walk you over to the fountain.
It will be very sad to sort of
Our guests get to be the mouth.
That really is the best.
We all get our turn, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So
he's laughing at his joke so much he can't even continue.
I'm
I'm starting to get a little loopy. The New to You Show is a recommendation and review podcast where we pick a topic and everybody brings, as a guest host, something to the table. And over the course of as many episodes as we have picks, we kind of dig into those things and discuss how they fall on the topic. So this week is success, and the pick was mine. So let's roll into it. All right.
Yeah, roll
right.
away.
There were prodigies and portents enough, One Eye says. We must blame ourselves for misinterpreting them. One Eye's handicap in no way impairs his marvelous hindsight. Lightning from a clear sky smote the necropolitan hill. One bolt struck the bronze plaque sealing the tomb of the Forvalaka, obliterating half the spell of confinement. It rained stones. Statues bled. Priests at several temples reported sacrificial victims without hearts or livers. One victim escaped after its bowels were opened and was not recaptured. At the Fork Barracks, where the urban cohorts were billeted, the image of Tiux turned completely around. For 9 evenings running, 10 black vultures circled the bastion. Then one evicted the eagle which lived atop the paper tower. Astrologers refused readings, fearing for their lives. A mad soothsayer wandered the streets proclaiming the imminent end of the world. At the bastion, the eagle not only departed, the ivy on the outer ramparts withered and gave way to a creeper which appeared black in all but the most intense sunlight. But that happens every year.
My pick is a novel from Glen Cook. He was a guy, he was like a naval officer when he was younger. He's born in New York, worked at a GM plant, and was just doing this mindless drudgery, this like mindless work, and started writing while he was working at the plant. And in 1984, he got his first book published, which was The Black Company. And it's a series that he's done over the course of the last book being 2000, so 16 years, these like 8 or 9 books. And he wrote some other stuff in the meanwhile, and The Black Company is it's a fantasy book, and it's very easy. It's almost like clearly in the face of a Tolkien or its peers at the time, which would be like your Forgotten Realms or your Dragonlance fantasy. Like it's also a little bit in the face of it's a grimdark, if you were to like give it a genre of fantasy, which means that it's a real, like George R. Martin has a very realistic setting. Game of Thrones is a grimdark where everything is very real, very visceral. The characters are impacted by the things that happen to them, and no punches are pulled. Right. It's a very brutal, like medieval fantasy world with magic or whatever. And The Black Company is specifically about, it's a world, with a couple continents, a north and a south continent, and who knows, you get over the course of the books, you get to see more of the world. The first trilogy really deals with the north, and the story starts in the south with this group of mercenaries who are working for this town called Barrel, and they're working for the local syndic. They're just bodyguards. They're hired mercenary force. Very, like if you're thinking of Game of Thrones, like kind of gold cloak kind of dudes, like hired by the crown to protect the crown, but they're like a mercenary band straight up.
Yeah, but wouldn't they be more like remember the goat? That
Yeah,
guy?
that kind of stuff. Yeah, like the
What was
Cell
that?
Swords, the
Yeah.
Free Company.
Yeah.
So that's that kind of thing. But
Or
they're
Daenerys or Darius.
Yeah, exactly.
His-
So they're a storied, like 100-year-old company who came from the further south, this mercenary group. And you are hearing tales from the analyst, the guy who's telling these stories is a guy named Croker. He's the physician of the group, so he's the guy who's patching everybody up, sewing them up. And he's also the analyst in that he writes everyone's stories and kind of keeps the records of the company and has read the past records of the company. So we start off in Beryl, where they're kind of in a shitty situation. The town is like on the verge of riot. The syndic, the like local rulers, basically just want them to be the front lines, which means they're going to die in this fight. And lightning struck this thing, and there's a monster on loose. And then there's a new like player in town. And so they kind of decide, you know what, we're going to cast our lot with this new player in town and find a way out of our commission. They basically like kill the guy who they had the commission with, and that begins their adventure to the north because they have to flee the town. And this person that they've taken up with is actually part of this larger plot. So the overall story is that way back when, this is like hundreds of years, or a few hundred years after, I don't know, like one of those big bad wars, like a Sauron or something, had like come to power. And in the course of coming to power, this Sauron type character called the Dominator had turned, his ability was to turn other like wizards into bad guys. And so he's like just turned all these people into bad guys. And so it was the Dominator and his lady, and then these 10 bad, the Taken they were called.
They're like ring wraiths.
Yeah, exactly. But they're all kind of like these powerful undead wizards now, like kind of like pseudo liches or whatever. And they're all infighting all the time and hate each other. The Dominator, though, was defeated by the White Rose. And so now the Dominator is buried in a hill. All of the Taken have been buried in a hill. And the lady was buried as well. Now, this dude, a little while, like 400 years later now, which is like maybe a little before this story has started, accidentally freed the lady. So she's out.
She's like an undead.
She's like an undead, like magical queen kind of thing. She was like the right hand to the Sauron. And now she is trying to conquer the world. And through like the guy that they hire on with at Beryl turns out to be one of the Taken. And so now the Black Company, this group of sellswords, is working for the big bad against the rebels who are the good guys.
Are they aware of they're not I mean they're not aware of the history, but are they aware that this guy's like bad?
They come
news?
into it.
Yeah.
They kind of come into the realization that we're in this now. But at a certain point that's all the background, and you kind of get that as you go. But the real story is about these characters just being, and Glenn Cook kind of says himself, they're just soldiers doing soldier things. And those soldier things, like the analyst flowers it up. These are sellswords who are, more than happy to pillage and rape and burn and do all the bad stuff that, people who are just soldiers doing their work in a war will do, and they lose sight of everything, and there's no good or bad. They're just doing their jobs.
No morality.
And really, the only code they live by is the family is the company. And so that's sort of the tale. You have Croker, who's your storyteller. There's a few wizards on their team that they kind of hide. Tom, Goblin, One Eye, and Silent are their wizards.
What do you mean they hide them?
Well, they don't want anyone to know they have wizards.
Got it.
Because it gives them an edge. So like they always use a lot of trickery because they want to avoid conflict unless they're getting paid for it.
Right.
You get paid as much to avoid trouble as you do to find trouble, and it's a whole lot less trouble to avoid the trouble. So they're always like, it's also about them like finding loopholes and trickery and kind of finding a way around direct confrontation. And
because they're also kind of protecting the reputation of this company as well, right?
Sort of. It's more like the only thing they want to protect is that the company is strong and you don't mess with the company.
Yeah.
Like you don't disrespect them and you don't look down on them. Like they're a well-respected, strong group of sellswords.
The last of the free companies,
Yeah.
they say a few times. Yeah.
The really nice thing about this series, kind of to pull out a little bit, is that there's no froofy place language. There's no, like, all the naming is very simple.
Yeah.
Like
Beryl.
like Beryl. They go to Opal. Another town is Ore and Deal, and like you don't have to remember a lot of these names either. They just kind of mention them, but if you do remember, it's easier than saying like, was it like Flordolin or Vilambalar?
Yeah.
They aren't highfalutin names.
I love Valambalar. Just went there on vacation. It was really.
But all the characters are really simple too. Like again, like the company names, they've all kind of given away their real names. Like they give away their past when they join the company. So Raven and Elmo and Pokey and Croaker and Tom Tom and all, like, even their wizards just have really simple names. And the new characters that they add, like Darling, this girl that they save from like another group of bad guys who are just happen to be another group of mercenaries or soldiers working for another Taken, because that's the thing, they end up fighting the other kind of internecine fights as much as they deal with the rebels. And then the rebels have names that are simple too, like Whisper or Rake. And so it's just all very clean. Like the language is simple because they're kind of like from the perspective of simple guys doing their thing, and they just don't let it get too Silmarillion or like highfalutin.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot, going back to Game of Thrones, of what Martin is doing with the North. You've got Ned, Robb, these very familiar to us monosyllabic. And then when you go to the South, you have, more Joffrey and things that are sort of tilted a little bit.
The further south you go, the more kind of extreme the names.
But that idea of an easy naming convention, especially at the start of the book, I really like that.
Ease in.
It really makes a huge difference. Yeah, you're not talking about, Galadriel and Lothlorien. It makes a big, big difference.
Yeah.
Or something very hard like Hermione.
Yeah.
So how do you see this book, the relationship to the theme?
So, two ways. One, like I've recommended this series to a number of people, like our buddy Steve Moerley, I recommended it to. This was recommended to me by my high school friend Todd. It's been everyone I've recommended it to has enjoyed it and has said like that was really fun, and like they just plow through it. It's simple to read. It's not simple to read like the Dragonlance books are, in that they're kind of more juvenile. It's simple to read in that like it's straightforward and clean, and it's very much like we're telling a fun story without like there's some problematic stuff because of the age, like some stuff like with like sexuality that you might deal with, like in you use terms like faggoty or something, which folds away. It goes away as the course of the thing. But it's 1984. He's a man's man writer. So there's issues with stuff, and that stuff is harder to forgive, and it's not that far removed from our context. But that's something to be aware of. But it's more substantive, and the storytelling is cleaner, and the characters are like more established than a Dragonlance or Forgotten Realms or one of those genre books that are really an extrapolation of or a imitator to like the Tolkien trilogy, that. And again, I'm not disparaging them. I just want to kind of put them.
Just
in
lay off Tolkien, man. Come on.
No,
When's he gonna get a break?
What
from
I'm saying
you?
is like he's
Gee
a very like
whiz, making fun of the Silmarillion.
His is like literary high fantasy.
Yeah.
And those books are then with like a high fantasy genre, and this still has like the high.
So he's
fantasy.
the Hemingway of it.
Yeah, and
these tight, concise sentences.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe, I mean, it's still not quite as potent of language as Hemingway would use, but the story and the characters are compelling, and the world he lays out is built to tell the stories and to like let you kind of flow with the characters versus being like, look at this tapestry that I've built. And I don't know, it's interesting. It's sort of, it's something where I've read them a few times over because they're so easy to read and the stories are so compelling. So,
did you find it to be, after you read the first book, I mean, not the first whole series, the first book, is it satisfying at the end of each book? So each book does have its own arc that you can just kind of like.
It's kind of interesting where, at least in the first book, for sure, each chapter is almost like a self-contained little like story.
That's neat.
Right. They're very long chapters.
Canterbury Tales.
Yeah. I mean, they're still linear and still told from the same perspective, but you could almost excise to the point where he will like kind of, you see this at the beginning of like all like the Harry Potter novels or some novels where they'll like spend the first part of a chapter, or when they introduce a character again, they're telling you that same descriptive information about the character, even though you read it in the past 4 books or whatever. Like it takes a little while for them to shed that. In this, it's a similar thing where, he'll kind of reiterate the relationships of these characters.
He's not assuming that you read necessarily.
Or even the previous chapter.
Right.
Like that's kind of the thing. Like the way that
So it sort of feels like short stories, strung together.
Yeah, but they aren't extremely short. They're
Right.
still like
Novellas.
like novelettes or like long short stories, sort of.
Right. I really liked, piggybacking off of the structure or the sort of pacing. I feel like this book, one of the reasons it read so quick for me was that it skips a lot. Like it really is not afraid to jump ahead, a month in the story or just jump ahead past something that I think most scenes that most writers would linger on or most writers would spell out. And it's, summed up this, you could have whole skirmishes summed up with "it went well for us," or something
Right.
like that. Like,
Yeah, and it's a lesson that I wish George R. Martin had taken.
Yeah.
Where it's just like 3 years later,
right.
he's a great magician. She's a skilled assassin.
Yeah.
Just like that.
And part of it too is that there's this, especially later, they sort of establish that he may like write this down and intend it to be read to the company or to the company of the future, like in these sort of like encapsulated little tales. And they get their dose of murder and mayhem, and they get their dose of like rapine and pillaging and all this stuff. What would sort of interest, like it's clear what he's writing to is who his audience is, and that's these people who
The next generation.
they just want to hear about the trick that these guys pulled over,
Right.
or like how, hey, yeah, these guys just hung around playing cards like us. Like that's the
Right.
kind of stuff where, they aren't going to, he'll allude to the fact that they basically, before they leave Barrel, go into the barracks of like one of the opposing groups and just kill everybody like until they get their fill, and then they leave. But that's just like, so yeah, we blocked this out and we stabbed everyone in their beds till we had our full, then we headed out. Like that's kind of it. Like they killed like thousands of people or whatever. Like that's it.
Right.
He keeps it very concise, and he's not focusing on that. And there's times where him as the analyst clearly states as much. Like, he kind of says like, they tell me that I'm writing too rosy a prediction or too not showing all the warts of these people, but that's not what I want to write about. Like,
Is the whole series told from that one character's point of view?
I think so. There might be a point where he doesn't write it, or that it's like he finds some writings from someone else, especially maybe when they're telling Beaumont's story. There's a part where they go and tell Beaumont's story, the guy who ended up releasing the lady. And I think they tell that through like his journals that they found like in some research. But it's fun. Like the fantasy system is pretty classic, like the big bad and the group of rebels who like fought him with their general and vanquished the big bad and buried them all alive because they couldn't destroy him. And then the big bad's trying to get out, or the new group of big bads versus the rebels, and with them waiting for their new general that's been prophesized. And it's this sort of like classic cycles of high fantasy, but we're learning it from the perspective of guys on the ground who just happen to be working for the bad guys. It's kind of clear that there's not, except for the fact that there's a lot of inner squabbling and a lot more like backstabbing, that the rebels are going to torture people and kill as many people as the bad guys are doing. Like it's not,
It's a great world.
Yeah.
After how many books does it start to you start to see the larger picture of this grand story being told of the big
By the
bads
end-
and all that?
Things pretty quickly escalate through the end of the first book. Like you get to a pretty big battle by the end, and things come to a head. There are like plots within plots, so that's what's kind of fun. Like it's almost like The Wire sometimes, where when you get to the next novel, you're introduced to a different set of circumstances and a different set of characters, and then they'll start bringing the free companies back in and dealing with the situation, which is kind of cool.
I really loved, there's a really potent moment or sort of series of scenes in sort of the middle of the book where they hunt down Shifter,
Yeah.
right, and Whisper, and that whole thing. It's this great exercise. The main character and one of his closest friends are sort of tasked with taking on this mission that really is way above what they should be able to do, and it's this great sort of rumination on preparing for something that is going to go poorly. I really like that whole scene. Yeah.
And there's a fun, I mean, like this is like the second or third book. There's a fun thing where they're fighting some of the rebels, and the rebels have wizards too. And so that's why they're able to vie themselves. And the wizards, they don't really like flashbang or whatever. It's understated and subtle, like what they're doing. But they do this magic where they basically like say, here's this block, block. We're going to pour treasure under it, and there's a divot in the block. And if you put the head of the rebel general in here, you'll get all this treasure. And just wait for this town to like track down this rebel general for them and kill the guy.
Yeah.
And that's the whole, like, it's just these fun, like,
and it drives that general crazy. Like he ends up losing his mind because he's so worried about everyone coming for his head. It's really
it's just those kind of like fun, weird mind games that they play with one another. And all the characters, it kind of becomes like you're part of this crew of like motley soldiers in the trenches. So it becomes like kind of a war book.
Does there ever become any kind of like moment of moral clarity at all where they're kind of like, oh wait, turns out there really is a scale of bad here that we're tipping toward?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that there are certain things where they set up lines for themselves. So they'll say, you know, like Croker's like, I don't like dead kids. I don't like it. Like, it's not necessary. We'll take a stand there. And some will be more callous. He'll kind of say like, it's usually the young, like the ones that are hanging on still, who are taking like, you know, who are committing rape or whatever, like, and as part of the pillaging, whereas the older people just like to burn stuff. Like, that's where they get, you know, that's where they kind of exercise their post-battle rage or whatever. And that, you know, they just kind of, that's stuff that's going to happen, so they just kind of accept it. But there's some things they don't. And one of the big things is really just like, you're in this mess with this group of people, and you'll survive as long as you can, but you'll survive longer if you respect the group and are part of the. And that's kind of the overall message is that. And then the complications of, well, what if one member of the group starts to gain a mission or go in a certain direction that the rest of the group may not agree with? What do you do? Where do your loyalties lie? But I don't want to answer that one too much, because they're actually like some larger like arc story stuff that those things may come into play. You'll just have to read to find out.
I'm just gonna have to read the book. Well, I found it interesting that this book came out in 1984. It really didn't seem like that to me. But also, just reading a little bit about it, the first 3 books came out within 2 years of each other.
Yeah, he wrote them pretty rapidly.
Yeah. That's wild. And so what you're saying is this was his first book out of the gate?
I think so. He'd written some like stuff in high school, and he might have had some short stories. But in terms of like published work, this was his first.
That's pretty sweet.
Wow.
Yeah. And did he write? So you said he wrote these up in well into the 90s, right? Did you say
2000 was the last of the Black Company?
So did he write anything like, or was just this like Black Company until he finished it?
There's a series called The Dread Empire, which I don't know if I've read any of it. And then I always confuse him and Gene Wolfe, totally different guy. I'm thinking of Gene Wolfe. He had like a PI character, like a more of a detective pulp thing that he wrote. But so it's this, that, and Dread Empire, maybe some short stories.
That's cool.
Yeah. Still, I mean, it's a good amount to write still.
For a first book, I mean, gee whiz, that's pretty swell.
He's like 72 now, something like that. Yeah, that's Glen Cook. You guys read a little bit of it, Keith?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is one that you had recommended to me actually several times over the past, so it was fun to actually get in there, and I intend to finish it. Maybe I'll go the Audible route.
Nice.
So I can
it was
listen to
great.
It at work.
It's really well read, and a little slow. I think that this book, you said that it reads really fast.
Yeah.
It certainly, as a story, you don't need to linger on the details. You can kind of move. And I found myself listening with plenty of time, not for lack of time, but listening at a little bit of a faster pace, just because I feel like it matched as fast as I would read it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rhythm of I really liked I mean, I didn't get to read a whole lot of it, but I really liked the writing style. It was it had an immediacy and
it's very punchy.
It's very punchy. And I sort of imagined it as like a fast talker kind of vibe. So I'll definitely be listening at double speed, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's neat too, because like it's the kind of thing where, you know, like when you're first reading first few pages, you're trying to figure out, you know, where you are and what about, and especially because it kind of throws you into it.
Yeah.
At first with the North, South, and Black Company, all this stuff, I was like, is this like a Civil War thing? It's like where I started, and I was like, oh no, not at all. Yeah. So it's I think I'm definitely gonna go on.
Cool. Yeah.
And you've read them all, Holt?
Yeah, it's been a while, and I think I read some Dread Empire in the mix there, so like things start to blur a little bit. But the first couple trilogies are really solid. I think they go like they kind of do the north, and then I think they go south for a bit or something like that. But it's a good. The first like 6 books or 7 books are really good, and then I don't know exactly how many he has in the whole series. It might be like it's either 10 or 11 or some series.
But so this being based off of like a Dungeons and Dragons-y type of a thing, do they ever kind of run? You said one of the characters is named Goblin. Are there like other kind of races or something like that in there?
No,
too,
it's all human. So that's another very similar thing. Like they kind of he's called Goblin because it's sort of like he's just a little like short, kind of fat, crazy, goggly-eyed wizard guy. They also like they let you know like a lot of the wizards, because they're from the South and they're actually like over 100 or whatever, they're kind of part of some of the earlier Free Company groups or some of the oldest ones in the company still, and it's clear like the South has black people in it and they're like black wizards for the most part. So they're so like that's where he'll like in terms of like skin color and stuff, it seems like your southern race of humans is darker skinned or whatever, and so
as it goes along, do you put together this world like kind of like the map of Westeros kind of thing, or
I don't know. I was never a great
enough?
cartographer of that stuff. It's just sort of like there's almost like a north continent that's if you go far north enough, it's really cold. There's like some stuff to the east, some stuff to the west, and then back south. Once you go really south, I don't know.
It's very detailed.
Yeah, it's a pretty like standard like it's probably
there's
like
some stuff in the east. I think there's something in the west too. And of course there's stuff down south. So.
It's all, but it doesn't really matter. Like that's the important stuff is that they go to this place that's up north and the barrel lands where all the bad guys are buried. That's important. Go over to the east or west. There's Charm, and that's where the lady's like that's her castle. That's where her that's her
seat of power.
And
the undead lady.
Mm-hmm, she's the big queen, and so they just have these spots where they fight from, and cities that they try to hold on to, but all that stuff is sort of it doesn't matter. It's more about kind of the passage of how these characters deal with this movement.
So I guess in this company, would Mad Mardigan be on the company, or would he be like one of the rebels, or
Mad Mardigan, like the good guy?
Mad Mardigan from Willow, where would
know.
he sit? I mean, coming from like a moralistic point of view.
I don't know. They probably kill him.
They probably
You think? No way, you can't kill Mad Mardigan. He's the greatest swordsman to ever live.
Yeah, they kill him. They shoot with an arrow.
No way.
So where would Popeye on this?
Popeye's one of the characters in the town.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Pokey, Whitey, Popeye, Elmo, Doughbelly. Just all the names are really like fun and weird.
Reminds you of a military type of thing too.
Oh, it's totally what it is. Yeah, just like like MASH type characters where everybody's got
the things we carried.
And it's funny too because they'll be like, that's captain and that's lieutenant. Like that's just their names. Like there's lieutenant, there's captain, and until you get a new name and are called captain again, then you stay as you are.
Then you're just Popeye or Goblin or
It's fun though. Like they just kind of the magics are pretty weird. Like they'll just kind of do illusions, and usually it's to make them look more evil. Like so they'll do stuff where they're like just black smoke coming out from them and like scaring people.
Or like bugs coming out of their mouth and stuff like that.
Yeah, just like they do harmful stuff, and it's kind of hinted that they probably do really terrible stuff. But for the most part, it's just like to scare the shit out of people and keep their image,
give them an edge,
and keep their image really dark. And it sounds like as you go over the course of things, it sounds like they were almost like the Free Company was part of like a thuggy cult, like a group, like a bunch of different companies that were sent out from one like town way south to just kill as many people as possible and bring about the end. And so like. But these are just over the course of things, like mercenaries come and go, and they've like a body, they've refreshed every cell after so many hundreds of years, and they don't have those annals anymore, and so they just kind of keep going with what they do have and still call themselves a free company. But
does it remind you of Berserk, like that mercenary group in Berserk?
A little bit, yeah, like Band of Hawks, yeah. A little bit, yeah, and also very grim dark like Band of Hawks. Or like
that was pretty grim, I thought.
Yeah, I would recommend it. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it on Audible. If you get, you're saying Chronicles, the first 3 books are available in one edition on Kindle for like $8 or something. And I don't know how is the Audible like bundle, or is it just like one book at a time?
I think it's one book at a time. Yeah, I have the subscription plan, so just grabbed it.
It's good. I was also like when I read it, which was probably like 9 years ago, was when I first read it. Surprised, like, oh, when did they write this? Like I'd read George R. R. Martin's stuff and was kind of in this mode of like more realistic fantasy stuff, and it's very refreshing. Again, having grown up on like Dragonlance and stuff, where knowing that this thing was parallel to that was just very interesting to me. That it just seems it seems very modern,
so much more sophisticated.
Yeah, it's like modern and fresh, and just I don't know,
kind of like the Cowboy Bebop approach to like
it's a kind of thing where again we look at they're actually optioning it to be a series, like a TV series, which makes sense. I mean, if Game of Thrones is doing really well, there's no reason this shouldn't be a series. MASH meets Game of Thrones or something.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how, like, if they pull it off and how that goes.
It'll be interesting to see how they translate the kind of like concise description into the concise language and descriptive elements.
They'll do it like it'll be very like Tannenbaums, like they're just kind of like pull the page and
it reminds me a lot of. Did you ever read the Belgariad, those movies or those books like Pawn of Prophecy? These are 1982.
Oh, wow.
And forward books, not the Grimdark, and they were by, I just looked it up because I forgot, by David Eddings. Really good, like this, very approachable, but in the opposite sort of spectrum of not Grimdark, whatever the exact opposite of that is, but the like merry band of like mostly
like
normal,
Robin Hood-esque,
mostly normal people trying to fight against evil. But written in a very similar style.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's check it out. Thanks, guys, for humoring my pick, The Black Company.
No, it was a cool one.
One last thing. So Success, I successfully got it, convinced people to do it, but also like the perspective of like when you succeed, there's a couple different levels in this. Like in the thing, they may succeed in like their task. It's like win a battle, lose the war kind of stuff. They may succeed by sticking together regardless of like what's happening around them, or they may succeed in helping the big bad do really evil things. But like it's interesting to see like when people are graying the areas out and everything's not black and white anymore, like what does a success really mean in that regard? Like if your law of attraction pulls something away from someone else, what does that mean?
That's right.
If your will is stronger than theirs.
That's right. If your secret is stronger than their secret.
That means you've just got an extra strength secret.
That's right. Hold your hand up.
Raise your hand. Cool. Good pick, John. Thanks.
Yeah. Great pick.
We did have 4 modestly accomplished wizards to stand sentinel against predatory tomorrows, though never by any means as sophisticated as divining through sheep's entrails. Still, the best augurs are those who divine from the portents of the past. They compile phenomenal records. Beryl totters perpetually, ready to stumble over a precipice into chaos. The queen of the Jewel Cities was old and decadent and mad, filled with the stench of degeneracy and moral dry rot.
Such a question, there are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the last in our Success episodes. We'll be back next week with a new topic and a new hit, a new series. I was one of your hosts, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho, and you can find me on Instagram at board_ghost. You can also follow or listen to my other podcast, RPG storytelling podcast at boardghost.com. Keith, where can people find you?
You can find me at earthlingkeith.com. What about you, Julian Cage?
You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Beautiful Jewels. And how about you, John?
And you can find me everywhere at Giaco Farino, Giaco.
All right, and we'll keep everyone informed about the movie or
The Ranger,
and its status, and we will get you back on. We love having you on.
I can't wait. It's my
when
favorite.
it comes to town, we got to do a special, maybe even like partially remote version or something like that.
Cool.
Where we bootleg his movie.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And we spoil the shit out of it.
That's right. Perfect. before it gets picked up for distribution.
Yeah. You know how it works. It's the internet. It's awesome.
All right. So before we get into what we got going next week and our wrap up, what was new to you, Jules?
New to me is a series called Chewing Gum that was originally a British series, and it's written and stars Michaela Cole, and it's now on Netflix. It's been on Netflix for a little while, and it is great. It's super fresh and different and really fun. It takes place in kind of a British version of a project, and
They call them estates, right?
something like that. Yeah. And Michaela Cole plays the lead character, who sort of has an ultra religious mom and has kind of been sheltered, but she's very weird and quirky and zany, and it's kind of her trials and tribulations or whatever. And it was based originally on her. I think she did it first as a stage play or something like that, and then put it into the series. And yeah, she's just a super fresh talent with a totally different perspective, and I really recommend it. And it's comedy,
Chewing Gum,
quirky comedy, fast paced.
Is it like a
Half
narrative,
hour.
like a sitcom, or?
No, it's one camera, and it's more like there's a lot of she talks to the camera kind of stuff, and
but
just
not like a
misadventures.
reality show.
No, not at all. No, it's totally scripted and zany.
Yeah, I mean it's scripted and zany, but it's not set up as if it were like The Office, like it was a fake reality show.
They don't. I mean, it's a single camera, but it's not. It's not trying to be like a documentary. It's not doing it all. No, it's more like a break all the time.
Right. Wow.
But like I said, just a weird.
Like a Parker Lewis Can't Lose.
I don't know.
Meets Trailer Park Boys and
But anyway, you should.
Little Britain.
It's on Netflix. Just check it out. Just try an episode
I'm gonna.
and Chewing Gum. It's a lot of fun. And
Cool.
Like I said, just
How'd
different.
you
Something
stumble
different.
upon it?
I just popped up on Netflix and I was like, I'll check this out. And,
How many episodes?
You know what? I haven't finished it yet, so I'm not totally sure. This says there's 12 episodes. There's been 2 series
Cool.
of 6.
Cool.
Shortish season.
All right.
Cool.
Gonna.
So next week we're going to start a new topic, hot, and I'm going to bring the first pick to the table with the Philip K. Dick adaptation movie by Dan O'Bannon and others called Screamers from 1995. You can find it on all different kinds of movie portals like iTunes. You can rent it, etc. You could try and find it on YouTube if you didn't want to drop a dime. You can also go read the original story it was based on Project Gutenberg or in any of a number of collected Philip K. Dick adaptations. Again, Screamers, the movie, based on the book or short story Second Variety by Philip K. Dick. That'll be my pick. So go check that out next week. To find out more about all the stuff we talked about during our Success series and the stuff we talked about in this episode, please go to newtoshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at newtoshow. Contact us. Let us know if there's anything that we did awesome, because we never do anything wrong for sure.
Certainly not.
We're super successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of it.
And,
Leave us a review on iTunes.
Or
if you get a
write
second.
a limerick. We'll
Write a
read it
limerick
right here on the
Write
show.
a
Ooh, a
haiku
limerick.
to us on iTunes, and we will perform it.
Going out on the show.
It may not be new.
Maybe
it's
it's
new
new
to
to
you!
you! Exclamation point.
Time to rest, but I gotta keep moving. This pitiful life is all about the music. 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 This pitiful life is all about the music.
With him together forever, without the limitation of time.